Hello and welcome to Crazy Paul Drink Podcast. I am your host Ian Gaio Loco Novak. Yes, we are not dead. We are back after a long strain.
Been a little busy.
Yeah. As with me usually, it's my partner in crime here, Mr. Nickerish Chicken Wood.
Yo, it's almost October, best time of the year.
Pretty much is October. This is actually the last day of September.
Can't say yet.
Yeah. But either way, that was a pretty good indication to start this weekly podcast I wanted to do this year, which is October themed. Because, as Nick has mentioned several times, probably on here and just in general, he loves this time of the year. And he loves horror stuff, so I'm sure he can't wait to talk about this stuff. Are you ready to talk about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty broad range horror, so, you can talk about pretty much anything you want.
Yeah. So, yeah, I already kind of did a small update video up on our channel on YouTube about what was going on, so I'm not going to get into any stuff about why we have not been on, because I already covered it. But this month, with October, our goal to do in this was to do a weekly thing where we talk about October themed. I didn't really want to say horror themed movies because not all of them necessarily have to be horror. It just gets you in the mood for Halloween. Not all of those are scary or frightening or even bloody, so I just call it simply October themed. That gets you in the mood for it, and throughout the week we just watch whatever we feel like watching and we'll just report on that. So, did you feel strongly going into this week about that project, Nick? Because I know you've been enjoying Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I've been doing for last week and a half, 2 weeks. I've snuck in a couple of movies, but nothing too serious. I mean, when you're addicted to something, you're addicted to something. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. I kind of felt like this year kind of going with a little bit more maybe smaller stuff that people don't talk about as much and some stuff that I have not seen yet. So I kind of split between those and some Stephen King movies. Both ones I have seen and ones I haven't yet. The ones I have watched this week I did not have seen before, so they were treats, I can say. But I'll go ahead, because how many do you have? I have 4 that I would talk about that I've watched this week.
2.
Okay, well, we can kind of throw in the couple that we've seen in theater that we have not talked about, too.
I believe that we've talked about one of them because it was a series we talked about earlier, so.
Yeah, one that I'm not going to be talking about throughout this month really until we see the movie probably is Halloween. I already did a whole thing with Russell about the whole Halloween franchise, who, sorry, our master of horror could not be here today for personal reasons, but we wish he'll be back soon. So this week I decided to start with something I had heard of that's actually kind of old, from the 80s. It's actually a Disney film called The Watcher in the Woods. This is only 83 minutes long, and it was definitely in the early 80s, which it has that feel. But it was recommended to me from some YouTubers I follow who said that this is kind of one of those underground, unappreciated kind of throwbacks to old-style horror that is done in the Disney way, but it has actually horror elements. It's about a family that moves into a house who's also on a haunted landscape, and it's kind of like a British feel to it. I'll definitely admit it has definitely the inspiration. I actually think this may have come out either close to or before actually Evil Dead, and it may have inspired Sam Raimi with his POV shot that we've seen like throughout the woods and stuff, if you've known that. It has a number of those kind of feels and looks to it, and those are definitely the creepiest parts of it. And the story is actually very mysterious and kind of intriguing also. All the performances mostly around are actually pretty strong for this time period. The one thing I'm definitely going to give a notch to this, though, as far as bad, the main girl that this is mostly surrounding is really terrible. She's got the just doe eyes of like, what's going on? Oh, that happened. Oh, I see this. And just, she's giving these lines that should be like with some emotion to them and just not showing the emotion whatsoever. So that was kind of distracting and unappealing about this. But, again, for a Disney film, especially, if you go back to those golden ages of the Disney films, there are actually some strong horror elements here that are actually pretty creepy, which I was actually pleasantly surprised by. So it's not a great film, but I think it actually kind of needs a little bit more appreciation for what it probably inspires and actually what it gave at the time. And like I said, it's only 83 minutes. It's not going to take away your whole day or something. So if you're a horror fan that likes to look back at, what started trends and actually kind of is pretty good in a sense, and one that not a lot of people know of, I would suggest Watcher in the Woods. Unfortunately for some of you, it's not on Blu-ray, and it probably will not be on Blu-ray for a while, but I don't mind having DVDs because they're that precious to me sometimes.
Sad news.
Well, we can't all get lucky with it. And there are ones that just are so that time they won't be unless there's a giant cry for them. So yeah, that's my first recommendation that I watched this week. What would you like to have said that you watched first, or however you want to approach it?
I don't think this one needs any introduction, but I'm going to introduce it anyways. Let's just say it's one of, if not Sam Raimi's best movie, Evil Dead, the original.
The one that I just read.
We talked about this, I don't remember what episode or what we were talking about, but I remember us talking about all the Evil Dead movies.
Yeah, that was last year.
It's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, they get secluded in a cabin, and all this typical horror stuff happens, but there's a lot of twists and turns, and a lot of Bruce Campbell's an absolute comedic genius. So, needless to say, I mean, I obviously recommend it to anybody. In my opinion, it's a classic, and I believe it's got like a 95 on Rotten. So, I think it's one of the best horror movies of all time.
Now you are talking about the first one,
yes.
Right? Okay.
The original.
So
I could go into the rest of them. I will watch the rest of them, so I'll talk about them too.
Okay. Yeah, that first one is definitely. I'm trying to think. Is it technically a game changer or an eye opener? Because they started the whole claymation thing that was really kind of cool with stop motion.
Yeah, that, and I think the fact that they mixed a little bit of comedy into horror.
Oh yeah.
That was probably might have been the first one
with small budget.
Yeah, it was one of the most small budget movies ever. They made it their own, and I think that they knocked it out of the park. And the fact that they mixed the horror and comedy, I thought was genius. So.
Yeah. Well, what helped them with all those elements with the small budget is the fact that Sam Raimi was a failed magician, so he had a few tricks up his sleeve. I do kind of wonder, how I talked about also with Watcher in the Woods and this, with the POV shots that happen in the woods. I wonder how many people that had to do that crashed with how the velocity they were going, because they were going really, really fast.
Yeah, and it was like 1981, so
yeah,
probably didn't have as much
and
resources.
And Bruce did some of his own stunts because, again, they couldn't afford stunt people really for them, so he took those blows to the head, really.
Yeah. So
he's a real trooper.
That's why the way he is right now.
Yeah, too many shots in the head will maybe mess you up later. So yeah, I would definitely say I would recommend Evil Dead no matter which one. So then the next up that I watched on this week was actually the first of my Stephen King list to watch. And it's a little known film called Sleepwalkers. That was highly recommended to me by another YouTube personality that I follow a lot of, and also Chris Stuckman. Shout out to his channel. I did not know about this film, but his about this opened my eyes to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to watch that, because it is definitely not the horror, scary elements. This is just balls out crazy, weird, and hilarious, and full of just random cameos. It's basically about these beings that are afraid of cats, because cats have the ability to hurt them, apparently. And so they try to keep the cats away, because they are their only weakness. But it's basically a mother and son, that's what we're told they are, who in the first 10 minutes of this film have incest sex. So there's already from creepy Stephen King stuff. But the boy in this is like in high school, and I guess in order to save and feed his mother is to find a pure life force and basically suck her dry of her soul, I guess. That's probably the biggest problem with this movie, is that not a lot of stuff is because it's explained well. The creature's story is not given well. They have like these weird abilities, these what we're calling them sleepwalkers, where if they focus hard enough, they can become invisible, and the car that they're in, but also change what type of car that it is. Yeah, just really weird, but it's got some great one-liners. It has really gory effects in it, and some really bad effects, which is typical of Stephen King movies. I also did not know that it's also one of the rare ones that does not take place in Maine, but apparently in a town called Travis, Indiana. So, yeah, we have really weird stuff that apparently now happens here. This is not one I would recommend if you want to watch a well-told story and be scared out of your pants. This is just balls to the wall, weird, crazy, and hysterical, and has maybe some of the best one-lines I've heard in a while. So I personally would recommend watching it with that in mind going into it. So if you have not seen that full review, would you want to watch that at some point, Mr. Nick?
I don't know. I mean, it's Stephen King, so I'd probably watch it. But
and I heard someone say that if you're a cat lover, that you shouldn't watch it because there's a bunch of cat deaths. However, cats get their revenge too, so I say it's kind of equal. So yeah, Sleepwalkers, I say go check it out if you're curious.
I'll let you go ahead since you got two and I got one. So
another one I wanted to check out that actually came out earlier this year. That's also a little bit of a different take. That was getting really solid reviews. I wanted to see, but I missed it in theaters, and that's called Thoroughbreds. Pretty sure you wanted to go see this too, really bad.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's basically about two girls that decide that one basically has a lot of emotion, the other one states that she feels really no emotion, and the one with emotion has what appears to be a pretty abusive stepfather, and they decide to try to figure out how to kill him. And this is definitely a throwback and a little bit of a slow burn sometimes to like Kubrick, and then there's bits of Michael Myers Halloween style in it where it doesn't show a lot of violence too. So that's one thing that I actually really enjoyed about it, is that those callbacks to it. But the other great thing is that this actually had like really good acting and really good characters. This is also one of Anton Yelchin's last films that he was in, rest in peace, who they gave a shout out to at the end, which I enjoyed. But it's just a great exploration of these two characters, how they, come to be with each other, and then planning all this stuff out in this elaborate, rich house too. I actually kind of barely want to talk about this because it actually is that well, and I say that you should really see this. This actually is close. I don't know if it might make my list so far best of the year, but it's just really strong overall everywhere, and it's kind of a horror element, but you kind of also go into it with there's not going to be a lot of violence, but I'm perfectly fine with that. So I would highly recommend Thoroughbreds, and I'm pretty sure you'd like to watch it at some point, wouldn't you, Nick?
Probably, yeah. Sounds bloody interesting.
And Anya Taylor-Joy, who's in this, I have been definitely pulling for as a strong up-and-coming actress. She's been really good in everything I've personally have seen her in, even if the movie itself was bad. So, definitely strong performance from her, and just see Thoroughbreds. What's next on your list?
Well, it's another well-known one. Back in the 80s, I'm sure you've all heard the movie Gremlins.
Yeah.
The original Gremlins. I'm trying to think of actually how many of them there were.
I only know of 2.
I want to say 2 or 3. I mean, there might have been a third one, but I don't know. It probably didn't even matter in the series. But Steven Spielberg was a executive producer in this movie, which was pretty interesting. I didn't even know that until I watched the movie again, because it's been a long time since I'd seen it. But, I mean, it's hard to explain it in a way that, you know, I guess a struggling inventor is depressed big time, and, you know, he has to have something go right in his life, and he ends up going to a shop and seeing this creature, but the guy that has the creature refuses to sell it, and things go to hell from there. Little cute Gizmo is just the main creature. Well, he's cute for a time until something happens to him. I'll let any of you, for some reason, hadn't seen it, you know, find that out. But
Well, they have very specific rules, you know. Don't feed it after midnight, don't get it wet, or something will happen.
yeah, and there's a bunch of evil little shits, you know, running around. I personally like them, but, you know, it does freak people out. It's, you know, it's got a lot of commercial success. It's very popular, and it came out around the time of, like, Indiana Jones and all that stuff, and it actually competed with it pretty well. And, you know, it's a cult classic to this day, 30 years old and running. So I definitely recommend Gremlins to anybody. I believe it's in the 80s on Rotten. So basically, so far, this, you know, the 2 movies I've watched, everybody knows about, but then Ian's going a different route, which isn't a bad thing, and going to the ones that not many of these people, you know, have seen, but, you know, could be successful. So definitely recommend both the ones I saw, Evil Dead and Gremlins. Go check them out.
Yeah, I definitely would say see Gremlins 2. Gremlins and Gremlins 2. I have yet to actually sit down and watch Gremlins 2, but I hear has that feeling of like a Christmas and a horror element. So I don't know.
Could be good.
But we'll see. I have a decent stack of stuff that I'm trying to get through. So yeah, definitely strong on my part. And the last film in my house I watched this week that I had not seen, that's also Stephen King. That's Stephen King's Dead Zone, starring Christopher Walken.
I want to say before you start that I've seen that, but it's been a long time.
Yeah. This was definitely in the 80s. It has that feel. It actually was directed by David Cronenberg, who has done a lot of things in horror that, imagery-wise, has always gotten people going, that's a Cronenberg film, because he has some messed up stuff in there, his movies. But this is a film about Christopher Walken's character who gets in a car accident and is in a 5-year coma, wakes up, and suddenly, whenever he touches somebody, he can see into their future. So it starts out feeling like, is it a gift or a curse? But then
It's bringing back memories.
Yeah.
No, I think I have seen it.
But it also has Martin Sheen in it, who then shows up as a candidate for a senator, who gets involved into the story-wise. This is definitely one of Christopher Walken's best performances that I've seen in him in a long time. Mostly because a lot of his stuff now feels like it's just like, it's Christopher Walken in this film. But he's usually the best part in those movies. I would say, though, some detractors of this is that it has a feeling that it was a TV movie, and that I've not gone into research about, because there's a lot of times where we'll cut black and come back in, so it feels like that's where like the commercial would be. And then the main woman that this story kind of falls around, that he's in love with, is really not written well. She has moments of decisions that to me felt very forced and out of nowhere, and this is also not a particularly long one, so that's why they just really feel out of nowhere, especially with the time that she's on screen. But it does bring up some interesting things about if you can see the future and then possibly change stuff about the future, do you do it? It's a pretty big topic that's brought up in the third act of it, because he then discovers some things about people in power and stuff, so it comes back now to, I don't know, nowadays when we know about stuff like that people are in power, and if we would have known about that, do we still try to change anything? It also has a very typical Stephen King feeling ending that at first I did not see coming, and then when it started to unfold, I was like, oh, okay, I know what's about to happen, and it was pretty satisfying in that way. So it had probably some of the weaker elements, in my opinion, of the stuff I've seen in these last few, but I personally would still say for Christopher Walken, who gives a great performance in it, and just some of the ideas, and the score in this is really nice. Also, it was produced by Deborah Hill, who produced the Halloween movies, and is with Mr. John Carpenter, so has that approval there. If you can get over some of the aesthetics and the way that it's kind of paced and some of the side character writings, then I say you might have a good time with it. So, does that get you feeling about Dead Zone at all?
Yeah, was it like mid-'80s?
Yeah,
I'm going to guess.
It was early 80s.
I faintly remember it. Like I said, growing up I did watch a lot of horror, but I remember that name. And you said Christopher Walken and Martin Sheen, and it instantly clicked. And I don't remember, I'm sure I've seen it, like I said, but I don't. From the way you were talking about it, it came back and it clicked.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't remember maybe it's because I think I watched it on TV that I didn't see that. Yeah,
Is it one that you would want to go back to see if you feel differently or the same about?
I mean, I probably would, just because, Walker and Sheen are both really good actors, and, and Stephen King, with those two, I don't think you could go wrong, to be honest.
And Cronenberg at the helm, too. There is also, as far as, like, gruesome scenes, there's a scene that involves a pair of scissors. That is kind of all I'll give away. So, because of our kind of smaller stacks of ones that we watched this week, I kind of now feel like we could talk about 2 horror movies that we've seen in theaters recently that we have not talked about on this. Let's start with the most recent one that we just saw last night, and that was Hellfest. A movie I know that, from what it sounded like, that we also saw this with our buddy Russell, who you two felt that, hey, this could actually be a pretty good time, call back to slasher films and stuff. I was kind of on I don't know about this, but, at least have a chance to look cool and maybe stuff. So basically, Hellfest is about an event haunted house park called Hellfest that happens, around Halloween time, and is known for being like legendary, very scary, very well made, and just less restrictions than most of these haunted houses that you might go to. And it's about, what was it, 4 to 5 friends that go, and around 6 friends that go, and it's also around the same time that just a slasher starts just stalking them, and it's that old type of stalker slasher film that tries to build suspense and thrilling. That's basically generally the general plot. It is a basic stalker slasher film that's just set in elaborate haunted houses. What was your feelings about this?
Going into it, it kind of looked pretty typical. I mean, you go to, I guess, a haunted carnival / fair looking place, and then you're all excited and you get VIP passes and get to get in front of the lines and all that stuff, which they did. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it gave me the vibe of it's one of those, that person's killing that person. Is it real? Is it fake? Is that what the whole movie's going to be about? And then, boy, I was right. It definitely was old school horror a little bit. It just reminded me too much of I Know What You Did Last Summer, and it was I knew it had a chance to be a cheesy horror movie, mm-hmm. and I mean, it didn't really disappoint on that either. I really can't say I walked away from it. And then I didn't really like the mask choice on the killer, even though he had 10 to 12 of them. He could,
Spoiler at the end.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. But I'm not going to give away the biggest spoiler at the end, which I don't know if it was, but, But I feel like they chose that wrong, and it just... About the only thing that, got me even a little excited about the movie is what, the Candyman showed up, Tony Todd, so...
Who is really promoted in this.
Yeah, and he's in it for 2 minutes, if that.
Yeah.
But you can hear his voice throughout, so I guess technically, throughout the park, you hear him putting warnings down, and, if you enter, you're going to die. But he has that iconic voice, mm-hmm. and that was the bright spot for me.
Yeah. I really struggled with this movie because I started to fall asleep sometimes. And that's because even though this is something that wants to pay tribute to the slasher films and stuff that we don't get as much anymore, it really relies on those tropes too much, and it doesn't do anything new with it. And also, these were some of the worst characters that were probably written in a while. To me, they were just one thing, one joke, and they were typical teenagers and stuff that just always just talked about getting laid and drugs, and gave nothing about their personalities in any way. So if I don't care about the characters and I start to actually just kind of go, well, go ahead, kill them off.
I am going to give another spoiler. It was the first time ever that we almost saw all the guys die first.
Yeah.
Because 2 of the main 3 guys, I don't care if it's a spoiler or not, died first.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's going to be a first at least. But
the first death was the most interesting death in the whole film, as far as what happened. Everything else was too standard to me.
And to be honest with you, I just wanted everybody to die.
Exactly.
I cared nothing about it, especially the secondary girl in the film. She was so annoying, dude. I just wanted to I know it sounds bad, but I just wanted them to just go so that her throat ended.
Mm-hmm. And
although I did like his tune that he whispered, but that's all I'm gonna say about that.
And I mean, again, without spoiling anything, when it then came to the ending of it, I just felt like, what? Really? And then when the actual ending happened, I was just like, huh? What?
There will be a series. I call that.
Well, we shall see how this does as far as box office wise, but gosh, it's been. I kind of have been wanting to go back and rewatch the first episode that you did with Russell, The Pit of Horror, about like the most anticipated horror films this year, and just go through that and go, how many of those were good? Because I really don't think it's been a strong year.
That's been a really down year for horror and movies in general, I think.
Yeah, and yet they made still one of my favorites of the year, even though it's not loved by everybody, and that's Hereditary. But then, like, these last few that we've seen have just been total drags and stupid. I think the only one that this was worse, that this would beat, was Slender Man. That's been my worst horror, not only worst horror, but worst film experience this year.
It's in my top 3.
Yeah.
I have 2 worse than that.
And if you're going to promote Tony Todd like that, you have to have more than one scene with him. So I'm going to give Hellfest a D.
Yeah, I was about in that range too. I love Tony Todd so much, man. I just wish they would have incorporated, because he's been great in a lot of stuff, and he's got the iconic voice. Like I said, he just could have brought something more to it. I know it's not his fault, but he definitely got a good payday for it, for just being in for a little bit and providing his voice. So props to him. There were certain things that I liked. I'm gonna give it a little higher and go D+. But that's not really saying much.
And yeah, again, for me, it turned into boring cliches, and even though some of the visuals were pretty cool, that's not enough for me.
Yeah, I did like some of the houses they went through, and some of that stuff was pretty cool, but didn't really help it enough.
Yeah. So now let's go into what was kind of, I know, towards the top of some of our lists of anticipated horror films that we saw a few weeks ago. And that was The Nun. Continuing the Conjuring universe, this takes place to learn more about the nun demon stuff that we were introduced to in Conjuring 2. And it's about a priest and a soon-to-be nun that go to a church because some nuns have been killing themselves. That is literally what this film is. It's just going through the motions and... Oh yeah, that's the priest. Hey, the camera turned. I wonder if there's going to be something behind them in the hallway. Yep, there it is. And there's a jump scare. There's a jump scare. This was all jump scares riddled throughout this thing. And again, like Hellfest, I didn't feel anything about the characters because they didn't talk at all or briefly mention something about themselves that was remotely interesting. Everything that came out of their mouths was exposition about something else, and that drove me nuts. And then let's go to the nun demon creature itself. We really don't learn anything about this demon that it was supposed to be, and she's barely even in the movie, and every time she's on screen, she's a CGI monstrosity every time.
Let me make this clear, though, to you all. Bonnie Aarons, who plays her, is creepy as shit.
Already.
Okay, so
and
there's that.
Not digging at her, but she already looks kind of creepy already without makeup. The higher, though, positives for me about this than with something maybe like Hellfest is that it's at least shot nice. There are shots that kind of bring up that classic gothic horror elements and stuff. And this is supposed to be a horror film, but this was like a straight up comedy to me sometimes because I laughed my ass off. And all I'm going to say about that is Jesus blood. That is
that
it.
one didn't make me laugh at all, but what was actually going on before and after the movie and during, now that made me laugh.
Well, that was laugh, but that was real life horror because the ceiling started to come off in our theater.
Thanks to the rain. Yeah, baby.
And we then had an attendee that about broke her ankle before the movie started.
And then two of the ushers came in and just decided to stand there for about 20 minutes, and I couldn't see their face. So that was creepy. That was the creepiest thing about the whole night.
Probably because they were told they had to go watch the ceiling to make sure that nothing else fell.
I wish it would have fallen on me after seeing this movie.
And our buddy Damon kept telling me that he was feeling some drops, so I kept putting my hood up because I was like, well, I might get wet at some point and I might get something falling on me. This is like the most intriguing thing about this movie right now. So yeah, I going into this was pretty excited initially, but then the more stuff of trailers that I started to see, I started to get more concerned. And then when we got the final product, I was really let down, but I also cannot say this without mentioning this, is I laughed a lot in this because it was so ridiculous and so stupid sometimes. And another underlying thing about what made it funny and over the top is, yes, you can really question with the Conjuring movies and stuff, like, based on a true story. Yeah, sure. If you take that in that regard, even with that, there are still some kind of realistic feelings with it, especially with the characters mostly. And a big thing for me with the Conjuring movies itself that make them good is the chemistry and the relationship between Patrick Wilson and his wife in this. They are the heart and soul of this franchise, and every time they're not in a movie, it kind of suffers a little bit. Annabelle Creation was one that kind of tried to make that as a relationship between friendship, and that's how it worked. And Annabelle was just shit. This is, however, the highest grossing of the franchise.
330 mil, baby.
So we will definitely be getting more in this series. And who knows, maybe we'll get a prequel of The Nun and it'll actually be good. Because that's the trend right now with this series, is that they'll break off into something else and then the prequel of that is better. So I'm going to give The Nun, because of some visual and I laughed, but I was also disappointed, a D+. What was your feelings about this? Even though you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot at all. Hugely anticipated, I think, for a lot of people this year, just because of what had happened with Conjuring and one of the Annabelles. And I was really excited for it. I know Russell was and Damon was. Actually, I think the whole group kind of was. But like I said, it was a kind of an urban legend kind of a night. You know, stuff falling from the ceiling, people not getting what they ordered at dinner, the ushers being really creepy, somebody about breaking their ankle. I don't know, just all that stuff overshadowed what I actually saw during the movie. And I can't recall what actually happened in the movie because I was just sitting there the whole time saying, what the fuck is going on? So, there was just too much to me. There was an over-reliance on weak narratives and,
and then the connection they make at the end, I think, was really weak too.
The fact that she was only in the movie maybe 3 times,
I want to say a grand total of 10 minutes,
if that. But I would like to see more of her, and it just the jump scares, it never got me. But it was the people next to me, including Russell, who touched my leg. Thank you. Who that freaked me out that one time, and then it was just me laughing at Jamie and a couple other people. It just
our friends that we went to go see this with.
But I didn't find this as funny as people did. The only person I actually found kind of funny was Frenchie. I think he was kind of funny at times, and I got a couple giggles. But just overall, this movie was trash and so disappointing. I know it made money, but if they're going to continue the series like that, they probably should stop.
Well,
I was really disappointed.
They probably should give it to like another filmmaker like that did Annabelle Creation, which was Mike Flanagan, who's like made a bunch of really good films. He made Oculus,
which was good.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to be able to retain stuff, and I didn't retain anything. I felt like I was just sitting there. I don't know. I was dumbfounded. Wasn't attached to anybody in the movie.
Nope.
I don't really know what else to say. I said, I was hugely anticipated this movie, and it just was a shitstorm.
And kind of to go back on like the comedy aspect of it for me, which is sometimes that's just something that kind of keeps you going in it, even if they probably aren't necessarily funny. If you are just losing interest in this and just are like, okay, this is what they're going with. As soon as they do something that is just over the top and ridiculous, you might just want to laugh your ass off just to wake you up, because that was another thing that started happening. I started falling asleep and just basically make you go, do I have a pulse?
And then I spent a lot of the time looking at other people because I knew exactly I knew they were going to do something about it to happen, and I knew they were going to jump scare or whatever themselves. So it was more entertaining watching them get scared than them actually trying to scare me, because it didn't happen.
Yeah. Either the audience will get scared by something that is not really scary to me, and that's hilarious, or they are annoying usually. The only time that the audience was really acceptable for a horror-style movie especially in this year, was A Quiet Place. They actually kept their mouths shut, which was another great movie.
There's a reason for that. It drew people in.
Yep. So yeah, what a interesting way to start out this weekly podcast.
Yeah. Damn near an F for me.
So yeah, got those horror films off our chest, and how are you feeling about this segment so far?
I mean, it started out well, and then we got into the stuff we saw in theaters, and then I hope the year ends better, because there's a couple here at the end of the year. Halloween.
That's coming up.
Yeah.
Hope I am definitely looking to keep this series going more hopefully on a Saturday, just because I feel like we have more time span there of less things going on, but that's just talk by ear thing. Hopefully Russell will be able to join us soon for the rest of the year, because I know he's got big ones coming up, especially Halloween coming out. And don't normally talk about music on here, but I also have to mention one of our highly anticipated albums of this year comes out from Ice Nine Kills,
who is horror based, by the way.
Yeah, which makes it feel pretty more awesome for this. But gonna go ahead and plug some stuff. You can find me on Twitter at GuyoLoco89, Ian Novak on Facebook, and Crazy Rooster 89 on Stardust, which I've been using a bit more. Nick, quickly plug some stuff.
Nick Wood on Facebook, Nickers Chicken on Twitter, and Nickers_Chicken87 on Instagram.
If you like to hear us keep talking about this, we will be doing more podcasts shortly. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crazy Poultry Inc. And listen to us also here on Spreaker.
Also important is you need to hit the bell so you know exactly when we make a new video.
Yep. On that note, guys, keep going to the movies and see you next time.
Get her done.